Hello, and welcome to episode number 12. Number 12. That's right. Of Harry Potter Abridged. We are live from Ponte Vedra, Florida, just south of Jacksonville. It's a bit of a different setup, and you are unable to be privy to my, as many people like to refer to it, preparations, because those preparations needed to take place, shall we say, off camera today. And yeah, but we can safely assume that they did, in fact, take place. So yes, here we are. I am visiting me mum currently, and so depending on how this goes, the next possibly few or even several episodes will be coming to you from this location, with this relative lack of ambience and background noise. I am sorry for having 11 episodes with my lovely Puerto Rican insects and frogs, and now we just have like the general hiss of a modern house. That's probably just the sound of the air conditioner blowing out of the vent in the ceiling is about what we've got. However, at least there's not distracting background noises, so there's that too. I mean, it could be worse. Let's not complain. Meanwhile, I am currently awaiting to see what this next hurricane is about to do to Puerto Rico, because it's the probability of a hit is no longer really at issue. It's really just a matter of where exactly it strikes and how hard. So, things are potentially a little up in the air, and pun, sure, we'll take it. Anyway, enough about me. Let's move on to this chapter. I actually, I will say this last thing about about me, but more related to this chapter too, is that I started doing this episode the night that I flew out, which was when you fly overnight, days start to get a little funny. But I think that was the night before last. Yeah. Pretty sure that's right. Anyway, and but it's just that the way my preparations ended up running, which was also known as last minute, I didn't quite have time. I got like 10 minutes into the episode, and my friend texted me that he was on his way, and I knew he'd be there way before I got done, so I didn't even keep going because I didn't want to feel even more disappointed by having to stop. So here we are from the top again, and really, again, only for me, because clearly you never heard that. So, chapter 12 in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is called the Mirror of Erised, and this is I don't know, this is one of those, one of the first chapters that starts to really sort of lay some of the emotional weight of what has happened to a couple of our characters, and mainly Harry, obviously, but actually a few, I should say. I mean, and it's not that these things haven't already been mentioned or hinted at or any of that stuff. It's just we go a bit deeper is all this time. And yeah, so the chapter begins to let us know that Christmas is coming, and that geese are getting fat. No, she didn't mention anything about geese. But it's mid-December, and Hogwarts is now covered in snow, several feet we see. The lake is frozen solid, and the Weasley twins are up to their shenanigans. They bewitched some snowballs to follow Quirrell around and bounce off of his turban. But of course they were punished for that. That's what we get the information on. We're told that owls are having trouble because, it's really snowy, blizzardy even. And we are kind of led to believe that Hogwarts is probably at a slightly higher altitude than some places. And it's north of the country, and north in the country too. So, I mean, it's bloody cold. Anyway, weather descriptions. Drafty corridors, lots of cold. And of course, the worst, both literally and literally. Yes. By that I just mean the temperature situation and the general lack of any other kind of warmth is Professor Snape's classes, the potions class in the dungeons. And they can see their breath. It's fucking cold, mate. It cold as hell, bro. Right. So we've covered all those. Good. And our good friend Draco Malfoy, of course, has to speak up, and basically he's still pissed that Slytherin lost the Quidditch match after Harry barely stayed on his broom because it was being cursed, and because he caught the snitch in his mouth and won the match for Gryffindor. So anyway, so his only way to really get any kind of satisfaction and any kind of revenge, so to speak, against Harry is to make reference loudly in the class to, well, maybe not loudly because I'm assuming nobody else was talking, but out loud about how their students, that aren't going home to their families for the holidays, and how he feels so sorry for them not. And of course, fucking Crabbe and Goyle, the cronies, shuckle, but Malfoy's just fucking sour, and he's lame, and he tried to make other jokes about Harry regarding his method of catching the snitch, and none of them really had any traction, so he's back to insulting him for not having a real family, because, when you can't get anybody with a real insult, let's just, go for the low blow. Good old Malfoy. Tells you a little bit about the example set at home at old Malfoy Manor there. Not so good there, Lucius. Not so good, son. Anyway. But for Harry, for once, Malfoy's taunts don't really mean a whole lot to him, because if Malfoy understood anything about Harry's background, which of course he can't, because if he did, then he wouldn't be the antagonist, and so he wouldn't be the Malfoy that we know. And there would be some other prick that was the antagonist. So no. Anyway, but, for Harry, it's like, shit, man, where I grew up was about the shittiest place you could grow up. So not having to go back there for the holidays, bonus. So yeah, for once there's no real bait for him to rise to, because he's not really, he doesn't feel bad about himself. So, and of course, as it turns out, that's usually when we lash out the most, is when we feel shitty about ourselves. Just spoiler alert for life, FYI. So yeah, and then on top of all that, Ron's going to be staying, and his brothers, because the Weasley family, well, the parents are Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, are going to Romania to see Charlie, their, I think, eldest. I can't remember if Bill or Charlie's the oldest, but whatever. One of the oldest of their two sons. So, yeah, I mean, not only does Harry not have to go to the Dursleys, but he gets to stay in a castle with an amazing great hall with amazing food, with his best friends now that he's made. So, yeah, generally speaking, not a bad scenario for our hero here for his first Xmas away from the nest, as it were. What a nest. Ugh. Doesn't even seem like the right word. It's just the one that came out, but I'm not going to waste time finding another word right now. Anyway. Right. So anyway, they leave they for once a chapter ends without a potions class ends. The chapter is not over. Fear not. This is not going to be the shortest episode ever. Anyway, for once, one of Snape's classes ends without there being like some kind of either catastrophe or confrontation. And I mean the ones that are mentioned in chapters. I'm not talking about every class that Harry, hypothetically takes in potions. Anyway, right, so they leave, and there's a big tree blocking the corridor, a big fir tree, and then, of course, that means that Hagrid's carrying one of the Christmas trees to the Great Hall. Why he's near the dungeons? Right. We're going to just assume that they at least got like a floor up or something, and we're getting, because why would a tree be coming from down below? It should be coming in from outside through the entrance hall or something, right? Right? What am I missing here? Oh, that it's the first book. Okay. All right, cool. Love you, JKR. Don't hate me. Of course, you're never going to hear this, so that's not really an issue, but I'm just saying. These are the things that when you start to like verbally analyze a book, you run across. But let's not stray too far off. Anyway, they run into Hagrid, and Ron offers to help as if a tree that Hagrid's carrying could be aided in any way by a couple of 11-year-old boys. But whatever, but of course, Hagrid's like, no, I'm good. Not a problem. And then Malfoy comes up behind him and he's like, would you mind moving out of the way? And of course, now he's like, well, I can't really taunt Harry. So, you know what? Let's go for the even easier target. Let's taunt Ron. So, yeah, he gives Ron shit and basically is like, oh, you want to be the gamekeeper's assistant or, be the gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts, and, makes fun of his family's house in comparison to Hagrid's hut, and Ron's just about had it with Malfoy anyway, so he goes at him. He doesn't do anything really, but he ends up grabbing, he like rushes him and, he dives at him, and he, grabs the front of his robes, but then, of course, Snape then shows up right on fucking cue. And, Hagrid tries to defend Ron, but of course Snape's not hearing it because provocation is not, part of things that get punished, at least as long as this provocation comes from a Slytherin and the respondent to this provocation is a Gryffindor. Then provocation doesn't mean anything. Taunts and, saying shitty things about people's family, not a big deal. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to condone violence either. I'm just saying that it's always, one-sided with Snape. Always. I mean, as far as anything like this is concerned anyway, especially if it's Harry or any of his friends. But anyway, so 5 points from Gryffindor, fuck you, Ron, basically. So yeah, And be grateful it isn't more. So we move on, and Hagrid's like, listen, get over these fuckers. Just come with me to the Great Hall. It'll lift your spirits and stuff. And so they do. They follow him in there, and of course it's amazing because it's Hogwarts, and it's the holidays, and they know how to decorate. McGonagall, she does a mean great haul for the old festivities there. And we have all of the hundreds of candles. We have the tiny icicles. We have all that good stuff. Holly and mistletoe, etc., etc. And for some reason, Hagrid doesn't know how many days they have until their holiday, but he asks them, and Hermione tells him that there's just one left. And then Hermione's like, yeah, and that reminds me, we should be in the library. And Ron is like, yeah, you're right, we should. And that raises Hagrid's WTF, like, spidey sense. He's like, wait a minute. The day before your holidays, all three of you need to go to the library? Really? That seems a bit much, dude. Dudes and dudette. And Harry's like, oh, no. We're not going to do schoolwork, dumbass. We're going to go find out who Nicholas Flamel is, because you spilled the beans, buddy. And we're going to figure it out. And Hagrid's like, whoa, time the fuck out, dude. Time out. No. I shouldn't have told you that. You know I shouldn't have told you that. And it ain't got nothing to do with that dog's guarding, which of course is complete bullshit because he totally gave that information up. And you don't just give up information, even though you sometimes really, 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 really wish you could. You can't. And so, Hermione's just like, we just want to know who he is, and Harry's like, you could just tell us and save us all this time. And, anyway, Hagrid's like, yeah, I fucked up before, not fitting to happen again right now. No, and also no, and let me start and end by saying, hell no. So, that's pretty much that. And so Ron's like, well, I guess we'll just have to go figure it out then. Hagrid's just like, fuck. All right, well, I'm still not going to tell you, so go on then, and worst of luck to you. So, yeah, and we find that they've been searching for pretty much ever since Hagrid, let that info out. And, because in their minds, I mean, they are like fucking three little Veronica Marses running around, like, determined to solve this mystery. And so they're like, how else can we find out what Snape's trying to steal? Because, of course, they are sure that they're right about that, too. So, I mean, you got to give it to them. For 11-year-olds, they're pretty good little detectives, but there are some holes in their plans. As there would be, there aren't too many foolproof 11-year-olds. It's just not the nature of life and the way the brain develops and shit. Anyway, imagine what the Star Kids were doing at 11. A bit different. Also, not really the same kind of time frame, so let's not go there. And I ain't talking about the TV show. So yeah, they've looked in all kinds of books and trying to find like famous wizard name type things and like people that have done shit and people who've accomplished things and such developments in wizardry and whatnot, etc., etc. Yes, I'm saying that wrong on purpose, and by wrong I mean incorrectly. So just I can be a grammar Nazi too. So just back the fuck off, okay? Right. But no luck. They've looked in all the books and no love. No Nicholas Flamel. And so Hermione being Hermione has basically created like a little study list of subjects for them to look in while she's gone for the holidays, which is kind of already comical, really, if you think about it. Like, Hermione's going to leave, and then she expects Harry and Ron, of their own volition, to continue searching. And it's not that they're not interested. They obviously very much are. Probably Harry the most of the three, even. But it's the holidays, and it's Harry and Ron and Fred and George. What do you think's going to happen? So anyway, so they go to the library, and for now they're just going through and getting more books. And we get the first mention of the restricted section. Which, of course, anybody who watched the most recent season, that would be 7, yes, of Game of Thrones, has all probably put together the essential reference. I mean, I don't know if that's what they were really trying to reference, but it's so blatantly similar with Sam's storyline in Game of Thrones on the show, where there's books in the restricted section that could, in his case, have much bigger impacts on, like, the world he lives in and stuff. This is like, for Harry, it's really kind of petty. I mean, he's just trying to find out who this one person is, and he's not even sure why right now. So it's not nearly as severe. Even if Snape is evil, and even if Snape is trying to sneak into this hiding place to steal whatever this thing is that he's trying to steal, even if all Harry's worst thoughts about it are true, not really a good comparison. But, we're here for the tangents too, right? We are, but we're back. And so Harry, like, goes over there and is, like, looking and then, like, staring into the restricted section, and fucking Madam Pence, the librarian, who is, like, just a step down from Filch in nastiness and just general bad attitudiness, he's like, what are you looking for? And he's like, nothing. And she's like, well, then get the fuck out. And and really, like, you got to kick somebody out of the library just for looking in an area. He didn't enter the restricted section. He was just standing there. Like, she couldn't have just told him to go back to whatever he was doing before, or, like, go get out of this area or something. No, you just got to leave. You ain't got a good answer. Get the fuck out. But, whatever. I mean, that's Madam Pence. She's kind of, right. Let's keep it moving. And Harry's like, shit, man, if I'd have known she was going to be such a bitch, I would have, like, come up with a story, but she put me on the spot, and now I'm out in the hallway. So he has to wait for a few minutes, and then next thing you know, Ron and Hermione, I guess, somehow figure out that he's gotten kicked out, and they come out too. And, they could ask Pence, but A, she's grade A bitch, but more importantly, they figure that even though she probably does know who or how to find Flamel, and even if she did somehow decide to be helpful, chances are the information, and of course they're just worried about it getting back to Snape. Again, they are Snape focused in this quest that they have going right now. But that's how it goes sometimes. So, and we get reference that they've been looking for a solid 2 weeks, a fortnight in fact. But no love. And we get mentioned that what they'd really like is a nice long look without Madam Pence breathing down their necks. That's called foreshadowing. And Hermione's like, you guys will keep looking while I'm away, won't you? And, send me an owl if you find anything. And, and Ron's like, oh, Ronald, you most of the time, well, whatever. Anyway, Ron's like, yeah, Hermione, you could ask your parents. That'd be safe. And she's like, yeah, that'd be real safe since they're dentists. AKA they're muggles and they don't know anything about the magic world. But, good job, Ron. I mean, you're trying. You're reaching, but you're trying. Anyway. And of course, that's the end of the scene with Hermione and she's, off to her holidays. But, and then just, I already said this, but once the holidays get started, Ron and Harry start having way too much fun to be really concerned about looking in books for anything. And you really can't blame them. They're 11-year-old boys and they have most of a common room in a castle practically to themselves. Fuck the library. That's pretty much how I'd feel. And they get the good chairs by the fire and they can, just basically, they're just living the life, I mean, fuck, how do you beat that? Holidays in a castle? Mostly to yourself? I know I just said it, but I'm just saying it again, because goddamn, that's beautiful. Anyway, I'm just saying, okay, right. And we get our first mention of wizard chess, I'm sorry, there's no not plural, there's no possessive S at the end of that. There's no S at all. It's just wizard chess. And we learn that basically the rules, for all intents and purposes, are the same as regular chess. It's just that because it's magic and wizard chess, that the pieces move on their own. You just tell them where to go. And when they get where they're going, if they're taking a piece off the board, they take the piece off the board, not you. Which makes it, generally speaking, a more entertaining game all the way around. Because you are, as it says, sort of directing troops in a battle, not just playing chess. And we get, of course, Ron's chess set, just like everything else that he pretty much owns, is a hand-me-down. But in this case, maybe one of the very few cases, it actually works to his benefit because magical things that have any kind of is sentience a word? But any kind of magically created consciousness or whatever, they seem to it's almost like magic AI, like they have like magic learning, like how like certain kind of artificial intelligence that's created has like a learning algorithm built into it to sort of like have what they call machine learning, I think, and just learning, and just like the AI gets smarter as it receives more data and is able to sort of like organically grow. Well, that seems to be how the intelligence of magically created consciences, oh Jesus Christ, consciousnesses, words that you know, but suddenly when you try to say them sound all wrong no matter what. But you know what I'm trying to say, okay? So those things are, they get smarter. They learn things. So point being, Ron's old, worn out chess set is wiser than the average. So they kind of like know what you should do. If you tell them the wrong move, they'll probably be like, you should probably send me here or send that guy there. So, and then, but Harry's borrowing a set from Seamus, and they don't trust him because he's not a good chess player. So they're like, no, they're actually doing what I was just saying. They're like, no, don't send me there. Like, you see that knight he's got? No, dude, don't do that. Send the pawn. He can be, So like, yeah, it's just I know it's just a little gag, but it does kind of give us some information that it comes back in a way, because there's other magically sentient things that learn and that do things as well as the portraits are another example, the paintings, and they're a big one actually because there's different kinds of scenarios with the paintings, but we'll get into those more later. Anyway, so Christmas Eve arrives, and Harry's looking forward to the next day because he knows it's going to be fun, but he's not expecting any presents or anything because who the fuck's going to give Harry presents in his mind? But as it turns out, he wakes up the next morning, and there are some presents at the foot of his bed, which was a minor change from the movie. Well, let me rephrase that. The movie made a minor change from the book. Obviously, it's not the other way around. There was a tree in the common room in the movie, and Ron wakes Harry up from calling him from down there, and Harry comes down from the dormitory and then opens his presents around the tree. Here they just wake up and what we will learn later is that the house elves most likely came in and dropped off the presents that were shipped for Harry, which would have been the same too in the movies, even though that's not mentioned, but there just would have been a different location. So anyway, and Harry's like, oh shit, presents. And Ron's like, what'd you expect? Turnips? Because again, Ron, even though Ron has reasons to be somewhat disgruntled in life, Ron's still very much a symbol of maybe not privilege in a way, but mostly just that he grew up in a relatively comfortable environment, even though it wasn't ideal in terms of the social structure of having that many siblings and being, the youngest boy and the next to the youngest child all the way around. It obviously has its challenges, and no matter what your scenario is, you only have what you have to work with. You can't be somebody who is more or less fortunate. You can only be you. Message. But anyway. But yeah, Ron's like, and that's evidenced in the fact that he's like, what, you didn't expect you were going to get presents? Like, everybody gets presents was almost what he said. He didn't actually say that, but that's kind of the, Anyway, it hasn't been that hard for Ron. Let's just put it that way. And so Harry starts getting into his presents, and he gets a roughly cut wooden flute from Hagrid, which, spoiler alert, will come in handy later in this story. So a very well-planted little thing, because it's just, not a big deal. And it also mentions that it sounds a bit like an owl, which is kind of cool. Hagrid always means well, and sometimes he even delivers with something kind of neat. So, and of course, just to remind us that the Dursleys suck, they sent him something. And again, like the level of spite and pettiness with the Dursleys is just always kind of amazing. Because, why not just do nothing? Why waste the effort to send something, even if it's an insult? Why? But anyway, they do. And basically, it just says that we got your message and we enclose your present. And it's a 50 pence piece, which I did not make the effort to I just kind of forgot about this, but I didn't do the conversion, but all I can imagine is that it must be like shit for money, because obviously they're not giving Harry any kind of usable money for anything that would put them out at all. So it must be like the equivalent of 50 cents or some shit in the US. I don't really know, or less maybe. I don't know. That's I don't know. I expect that Jorge will correct me, and I will appreciate it, as I always do. Or one of my other British listeners. I know there's a few others, but whoever, jump on it. Set me straight. And Harry's just like bemused. He's like, that's friendly. It's just kind of weird. And of course, Ron's like looking at this like, this is money. Harry's like, really, take it, because A, it's not really much, and B, I'm rich, bitch. Okay. That's right. We're gonna have Dave Chappelle references in the middle of Harry Potter Abridged. That's right. And then Ron saw the next present that Harry was going for, and he's like, just a heads up. My mom always makes these sweaters, aka jumpers. There's another word that we just don't use at all. Like, most of the words that are there's a lot of words that are like used in England and used in the US and just have different meanings, like the chips thing. We don't really call anything a jumper, I don't think. Maybe in like a catalog, somebody might refer to something like that. But like in everyday life, people don't call things jumpers. And definitely not sweaters. If it was something, it would probably be more, I don't even know for sure, but I kind of imagine that in the States, if something was called a jumper, it would be more like a romper, like a overall or a bodysuit type. That's not quite the right wording either, but you get my point. Anyway, these sweaters is what they are. Ron's mom makes them for all the boys every year. And, Ron always makes excuses like, oh, they're not really that great. She doesn't have a lot of time. There's a lot of kids. Whatever. It's not that big of a deal. And Harry's like just glad to be getting the present, So, yeah. And of course, Ron's like, and mine's always maroon, which does seem a little cruel. Like, maroon with like orange red hair. Come on, Miss. Are you fucking? She's not the kind of mom to fuck with her kids, though. That's not really her thing. I'm not saying she doesn't have a sense of humor, but not like that. She's not a prankster. That comes from the Mr. Weasley side of the family, I think. The actual Weasley side of the Weasley family. And there was fudge in the package too, and of course that's one thing Mrs. Weasley's cooking never lacks for being delicious, apparently. So the fudge is good. Hermione gave him some chocolate frogs. We are just... yes. And then we get to the package, the important package, which, as it turns out in the movie, is like essentially the only package that he opens on screen. Which I can totally understand why, but just, Anyway, that's why we love the books, because they're better. And so he opens this like package, and it's just it's light, but like kind of not very shaped like anything. And so he opens it up, and something fluid and silvery gray went slithering to the floor. And Ron is like, I've heard of those. And he's like, holy shit, they're rare and they're valuable. And Harry's like, what is it? And Ron's like, it's an invisibility cloak. Which is another thing that doesn't happen in the movie, which is kind of annoying. Most of the changes to this scene really are just kind of unimportant. But this one kind of bugs me only because this scene, this little detail in the book lets us know, it reminds us that Ron has familiarity with things, and we'll learn later that Ron's father works at the ministry. And so even though he's dumb about a lot of things, especially emotional things and like, just typical boy type bullshit things. He possesses certain knowledge that it becomes kind of invaluable later on, just because of the type of upbringing that he's had and the environment that he's been in. And so him recognizing an invisibility cloak on sight is sort of I can say big deal, but it's an important detail, I feel like. But I guess the movie doesn't necessarily take the same angle when it comes to what the characters actually do or what they know. I don't know. It's been so long since I've seen them, and I've read the books like many, many times. And I have seen all the movies more than once, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same. So anyway, yeah, Ron's like, that's an invisibility cloak. Try it on. I know what it is. And Harry's like, what? Okay. And then he throws it around his shoulders, and sure enough, everything below his head disappears. And Harry walks over to a mirror, and he's like, holy shit. This is crazy. And of course, this invisibility cloak, now that it's introduced to the story, becomes like a rather giant plot device. I mean that literally and figuratively in this case, because I'm sure it's a decent sized thing, but eventually all three of them are going to run around underneath this thing. And it's a cloak. Like, unless it was made for Hagrid, like, and they do mention later that, like, by a certain point, like, it's a lot more difficult for the three of them to move around under it because they're no longer 11. And they've, had growth spurts and such, and so that their shoes, or trainers, as it were, show and underneath and things like that, and sometimes they have to like duck down or like move quickly or blah 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 blah. But anyway, but it's just the fact that it gives Rowling a device to move Harry and or Ron and Hermione along with him anywhere she wants to move them in a story without being seen. And that's, it should, I feel like it should bother me more than it does, but for some reason, the way she uses it, most of the time it doesn't. We'll see how that goes, though, if I keep doing these indefinitely, because I'm saying that all with the hindsight of just loving the story and not really having picked it apart, because I don't really reread. It's not my rereads of Harry. I mean, yeah, I do pick up details sometimes, but I'm not really doing it for that. It's mostly for enjoyment. So now that I'm doing this, I'm just seeing things that I don't always see. And so I don't know. We'll see how I feel about it as we go on. But for the most part, my general feeling right now is that while it is obviously just like a giant plot device that sort of allows her to get away with a lot of stuff, most of the time the way it's used is usually humorous or clever or just entertaining in general. So yeah, anyway. So, and then Ron's like, hey, there's a note. It's not just the cloak. And so Harry's like, oh shit, all right. So he goes and grabs the note, and the note basically says that, well, actually, I will read it. It's only 4 lines. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time I returned it to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you. No signature. Of course. Because, we can't, got to control the information. And of course, Ron immediately is like, I would give anything for one of these. So of course, Ron now immediately has something else to be jealous of Harry for. And not only something else, but something else that Harry has no control over, like all the other things that Ron would be jealous of Harry for. So yeah, that's the most unfortunate thing about any of the issues between Harry and Ron is that they're totally out of Harry's control. And that's got to be frustrating. But anyway, there was more to that, I think, but it didn't materialize in my brain parts. But Harry, on the other hand, isn't like thinking, man, I'm glad that I got the coolest thing ever. He's thinking, who gave this to me? Why didn't they sign the note? Did it really belong to my father? That's kind of heavy. Unlike the cloak itself, which is very light, the message and the meaning of being given, like, this is the first thing he's ever been given that belonged to either of his parents. And for all intents and purposes, it probably is the only thing that's ever given to him that belongs to either of his parents, because his house was destroyed when he was a kid, or at least mostly. I mean, and there really wasn't much other than the gold. But I mean, we're talking about like more personal possessions than just money. You know, a gold piece is a gold piece is a gold piece for all intents and purposes. And I just used all intents and purposes twice within like 30 seconds or less. So, you know, hey, this environment's a little different for me. So I apologize if this episode's a little bit more rambly. I'm a little more distracted. I'm a little bit more, I don't know. It's just different not being where I normally am when I do this. So I'm doing my best here, folks. And I hope that's working out for you. Hopefully just the fact that I haven't done one in a couple days will make it easier to just overlook the things that might annoy you. Hopefully they don't. Anyway. But yeah, he's just a little, you know, not so much concerned. It's just one of those things. I mean, it's just kind of a heavy sort of thing. And Ron's like, what's up? And he's like, don't really have the word. And then he's kind of like let off the hook in a way, because Fred and George shows up. So he hides it real quick because he's not really trying to share that with anybody else just yet. And, you know, but that's the thing. The Weasley twins always inject a bit of levity into the situation. So something that was getting heavy is no longer going to stay heavy. And we find out that Fred and George have an F and a G on their jumpers. And it's funny because every time I say jumper, the way I say it, I imagine Stephen Fry saying jumper. Or however, that's not exactly right, but it's closer to what they would say than what I say. So it sounds funny even to me. And she says that, one of the twins says that Harry's is better than theirs. Looking at it, he's like, she obviously makes more of an effort if you're not family. Which is actually kind of true in a way. Like, Harry does get like the special treatment in situations, again, that he did not fucking ask for. He barely even knows Mrs. Weasley, but she knows all about him because everybody in that world, especially the adults, do. So anyway, and they're like, Ron, why aren't you wearing yours? And he's like, I hate maroon. Corned beef and maroon. Mama hates me. Okay, maybe not the hate part. Let's tone it down. And then Percy? Percy shows up and like, what's all this noise? Because that's pretty much always Percy, like, at least for like now until like, you know, the last book. And even then, kind of, but just different. And he's carrying his sweater with him, his jumper. And they're like, put it on, and they like shove it. They Fred and George basically give Percy like absolute hell for being how he is. I don't necessarily think that it's ever any better for him, but that's just how they feel. But, and then like in the same vein, because that's just how they are, and they pick on the people that they love, They're like, you're not sitting with the prefects today either, pompous little Percy, you prefect. You're sitting with us because this is family. It's Christmas. It's fucking about family. You're sitting with us. So it's kind of funny because it's like on one hand they drive him nuts, but then they're also like, you're still our brother. Come sit with us and eat with us, please. But without the please. And so then that's the end of that little scene, and then we and so we have Christmas dinner, and there's a nice big fat food description involving roast turkeys and mountains of roast and boiled potatoes and chipolatas, whatever the fuck they are. I'll be looking for that in the comments. Also, buttered peas, silver boats of thick, rich gravy, cranberry sauce, wizard crackers. What exactly is a cracker? Because it's obviously not what Americans call it. This is one of those words that mean two completely different things. I mean, I kind of know what it sounds like it is. It's like something like it's like two things you pull apart and something pops out or something like that. Again, I expect to see some corrections and annotations in the comments on that because I need your help. But anyway, not only are these crackers, but they're wizarding crackers, so they don't just like have little bullshit. They like when you open them up, like things come out, like all kinds of things. They don't just make noise, and maybe that's why they're called a cracker. Okay, that's probably cracker, like a cracking sound, like whatever. This one, like, it goes off with a blast like a cannon, and it engulfs them in smoke, and then, like, there's, like, a big rear admiral's hat, and for some reason, live mice. And we get a mention of Dumbledore being up at the high table, and instead of wearing his normal, like, pointy wizard's hat, he's wearing a flowered bonnet. Also one of our indicators of Dumbledore's sexuality that I never thought about before now, but a flowered bonnet, not your average straight man's attire. Again, whatever, not a criticism, just a note that she did in fact lay the hints in there. They're always just hints. There's nothing overt, and that's kind of cool. Because it shouldn't be made a big deal of either. So that's, like I said, it's just kind of cute. And he's laughing at a joke that Flitwick told him. And then the desserts, it's just food fucking heaven in the Great Hall on Christmas. As well it ought to be. And Hagrid's getting drunk on wine, and face is getting redder and redder, and then he kisses McGonagall, and instead of being like, prudish or offended, she giggles and blushed. So I think that's kind of awesome too. Because the teacher should be allowed to have fun sometimes too, right? I mean, it can't always be just the students. Anyway, and so they have a nice, and so, damn it, somebody already explained this to me before about all the damn different meal names in England versus the States, and I guess dinner is like lunch in this case, because it says after that they went out and there was still an afternoon to be had, I guess is my point. So for all intents and purposes, it kind of had to be lunch. Because, when I think dinner, I think that evening meal. that some people call supper, some people call dinner, but it's not this dinner. So anyway, whatever. Weasley twins, snowball stuff, shenanigans, Harry and Ron playing wizarding chess again with his new set, because he got a new set for Christmas, and I missed who that came from already somehow, but whatever. Couldn't catch everything. We're abridging, for God's sake. And then it's bedtime, and so yeah, Harry reflects that it has been his best Christmas day ever, and yet something had still been nagging in the back of his mind, which of course, it's the cloak, and whoever sent it. So they get to bed, and Ron passes out immediately because he doesn't have anything that he's really concerned about in this moment. He's full, and he's happy, and he's got his presents, and he ate dinner with half his family, and all in all, he just passes the fuck out with a full belly. And so Harry pulls the cloak out, because Harry got things on his mind, girl. And he's just like, man, what in the world? Who? And he thinks about the note and the use it well. And he's like, you mean you want me to use it right now, don't you? So he's like, yeah, I kind of do need to. It's late. I could get in trouble. Let's do this shit. Nobody can see me. Use it well. It's repeated again. He's really, it's like, Wake the Dragon. It's like repeating. It's like pulsating in his head, and he's like, I must use it well right now. The whole school is open to me in this cloak. Oh. So yeah, he's wide the fuck awake now, and he thinks for just a moment as he's about to head out. He's like, there's Ron there. That's my boy. He's my new best friend and all. Well, not even new anymore. I mean, they've been at school for some time now, a few months. Which, I mean, again, at 11 years old, a few months is like a fucking year or something. Not to mention, they've already been through a fair amount just in that time together. But he's like, no, you're my boy, Ron. I love you and all, but it was my dad's cloak. It's my cloak now. I'm gonna get this first go round by myself, thanks. And I really can't say that I blame him. Like, of course, I'm an only child, so I'm like, I'm taking the cloak out by myself like the first 10 times, and then I'll be like, hey, now that I've kind of figured out the whole school, you want to go out with me one time? I don't know if that's true. That's just how I feel right this second. Anyway, so he's like, yeah, I'm doing this. So he does. And then he's like, I could go to the restricted section and look all night long for Nicholas Flamel. Which, I gotta be honest, isn't what I would expect Harry to actually want to do, but from a plot standpoint, it makes sense. Because it is still a mystery that he does want solved. It's not like just because Hermione's the normal one to really want to be in the library that she's the only one that's curious about this. They all are. But nonetheless, like your first night out with the invisibility cloak, the library is where you're going to go. Okay. Hey, man, figure that shit out. Or at least try. So, of course, it's pitch dark in there. He gets a lamp, lights that, and then he just starts to go look. And for whatever reason, this restricted section isn't really, it's just separated, but it's not protected because for all intents and purposes, Madam Pince is enough protection when the library's open. But since it's not open, there's just like a rope. And so Harry steps over and he goes into the restricted section. And, so far so good. No alarms have sounded. But, so he starts looking and he's like, huh. And there's not a lot of information on the spines of the books. There's not really a whole lot that he has to go on. So he's just like, huh. So he finds like a big one somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, a large black and silver volume. And so he's like, all right, well, we'll just look at this one. So he, puts the lamp down all nice and carefully, which is also a little unlike the movie. In the movie, he kind of just clunks it down. And I'm like, okay, like maybe you shouldn't have given such a heavy prop to an 11-year-old. But anyway. And so he pulls out the big book and he opens it and the book starts screaming. And he closes the book and it keeps screaming. And he's like, fuck. The first book I pull out, fuck. So then he knocks the lamp over and it breaks and goes out and he freaks out. And then he hears footsteps coming down the corridor and things are getting hectic, and he's like he stuffs the book back on the shelf because I don't know why, but he does, and then he runs, and he passes Filch in the doorway, but fortunately he's got his cloak on, and Filch isn't much in the way of a magic detector squib that he is. So Harry, slips out under his arm, and then runs up the corridor, and like you can still hear the book shrieking through the halls. And so he just runs and runs basically, to get as far away from the scene as possible. And then he sort of like looks up and he's near a suit of armor and he's like, wait a minute, where did I run? I was so concerned about getting away that I don't really know where I ended up. And it's dark, so he really has no idea where he is. And he's like, well, there's a suit of armor near the kitchens, but no, there's no way I'm down there. That's way too below where I am, like physically, for me to be there. So, and then all of a sudden he hears Filch, and he's like, you asked me to come directly to you if anybody was wandering around at night, and somebody's been in the restricted section. And Harry's like, oh, fuck, who is he talking to? And to his horror, it was Snape who replied. The restricted section, well, they can't be far. Yeah. They're definitely not far. So, yeah, Harry's like, fuck. He's right in the same corridor that they are, and just around the corner. But it's a narrow corridor, and he's not that far away. So he's like, oh, if they came down in the direction that he's in, they'd almost certainly run into him. Because, the cloak, obviously, as we're reminded, does have rules. You're still solid. You're just invisible. So you can be touched. You can be run into. You can be discovered. Just not via sight. So anyway, Harry's like, okay. So he backs away as quickly as he can, as quietly also. And there's a door that's ajar to the left. So he slips in. And just, he has to do the old hold your breath, suck in your tummy maneuver to make sure that he doesn't make the door move at all so that they won't see anything. And he does. And so he waits and he hears them walk by. They walk by. And he's like, oh, Jesus. Close one that. Use it well, huh? So, after they, their footsteps fade away and he realizes that he's alone again, then he like starts to look around at the room that he's taken refuge in, and fortunately it's not one that has a giant 3-headed dog in it. And it's just like an old, not currently being used classroom, and you could see like desks and chairs piled up against the walls, and then propped up against the wall is something that didn't look as though it belonged. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things doesn't belong. And so, yeah, it's this big, magnificent mirror. And it's a big mirror. It's as high as the ceiling. I think the movie mirror was of a decent size, but it wasn't as big as this one. It's kind of like the Iron Throne, you know. The Game of Thrones Iron Throne is, it's kind of cool looking, and obviously it's made out of swords and shit, but the book Iron Throne is a fucking monstrosity of metal, with a bunch of steps and a bunch of spikes and just insanity. And maybe that's not, you know, the full comparison here, but the point is this mirror is fucking huge. Like, you can't just go walk up and pick up this mirror. And I'm not saying you could necessarily pick up the mirror in the movie either, but it's not giant. It's just big. This is giant. Because, I mean, if it's as high as the ceiling, and the ceiling's in a castle, in a disused classroom, yeah, okay. I think I've overmade my point well enough. And it's got a Latin inscription across the top that happens to start with the word Erised. We're not going to bother with trying to pronounce all those other Latin words because I don't know Latin. And so, you know, now that everybody's gone and he's not in imminent danger of being caught or gotten in trouble, he's like, you know, he's not freaking out anymore. So he's like, well, let's go check out this mirror. And, you know, and also, like, he was kind of hoping to play the little game of, you know, like, oh, look, standing in front of a mirror with an invisibility cloak on and I can't see myself, but I can see through it. And so it's like I'm here, but I'm not here. This is fun. But instead, he walks up to it, and all of a sudden he nearly screams because in the mirror there are people behind him. And that's got to be a bit of a mind fuck. Like I'm surprised that he didn't scream, honestly, because, I mean, I guess you subconsciously, you know that you can't really scream without getting in a lot of trouble. But nonetheless, if you looked into a mirror and all of a sudden there's like a group of people behind you, that's got to be like, whoa. But, so anyway, yeah, so he like whips around and he's like, and so panic is all back again for a minute because he's like, what the fuck? But no, nobody behind him in the actual room. In the mirror, there's at least 10 others, which also another movie change. It's just his parents in the spoiler alert. It's just 2 people in the movie. But anyway, and he looks again in the mirror after he's looked around behind him to make sure that there's not anybody there. And in the closest to him in the mirror, right behind him, he sees a woman who's smiling and waving. And he's like, he tries again to make sure, and he reaches out his hand behind him, and he's like, she's close enough in the mirror that I would touch her if she was actually there, and he doesn't feel anything. He just feels air, so he's like, they're definitely just in the mirror. And he's like, wow, she's a pretty woman, and she has dark red hair, and whoa, she has my eyes. And he's like, so edges up a little closer to the glass, and he's like, yeah, they're bright green. They're the same shape. And then focusing on her eyes, he realizes that she's crying. She's smiling, but she's crying at the same time. And there's a tall, thin, black-haired man standing next to her, and he puts his arm around her, and he's wearing glasses. And his hair is untidy, and it sticks up in the back, just like Harry's. And Harry's like, oh, wait a minute. Mom? Dad? And they're all like, mm-hmm. And it's interesting, too, because I don't know if exactly how we learn a little bit more about how the mirror's magic works, but only in more general terms. But there's no, if I'm not mistaken, Harry is the only one who says anything. The other two just sort of gesture and smile and stuff, and cry, obviously. But so, he says, Mom, Dad, and they just keep looking at him and smiling. And so then Harry, obviously Harry knows that that's who they are. It's all kind of clicked in his brain at this point. And he starts looking around at the other people, and he realizes that they're not named here or mentioned specifically, but they have other features that he has, and so clearly there's like grandparents and probably like other, like, well, no, Lily was obviously not an only child, but her sister wasn't a witch. I don't think James had any siblings, so I don't guess there's any aunts and uncles in the mirror. So I don't know. Maybe his grandparents had siblings. They probably did. Somebody did, surely, that were also wizarding siblings who would show up in this mirror. Because if there's 10 people, surely they're not just grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, because otherwise there'd just be a bunch of fucking old, decrepit people or something. I don't know. Or would they somehow magically all be preserved at certain ages? That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense either. So anyway, that's why she doesn't mention who any of them are, because that way none of those questions have to be answered. They're just other people that look in some way or another like Harry, whether it be eyes or noses or knobbly knees. And so it's his family. And Harry's seeing his family for the first time. And like I said at the beginning of this episode, it's a little heavier, Like, that's not nothing. That's not just a cool magic trick, That's like, you grew up believing a lie about your family, first of all, and not knowing anything about who you were or where you came from. And now you're in that world, you know where you came from, but you've never seen... they don't have Instagram. There's no stories or timelines to look back on. So even with all their magic and all their making fun of muggles tricks, they don't have any way, normally to see things like that. And so while this mirror turns out to not necessarily be the most amazing thing or the most useful thing, it is kind of amazing, because this is something that essentially never would have been able to happen like this. Even though Harry will, in fact, see images of his parents later, in different ways, sometimes in photographs and other magical ways even, but not like this. Not in this kind of form, not in a way that he can just sit there and look at. And again... Well, yeah. This is stuff that's going to come up later, and so let's keep going. And so, yeah, they just smile and wave, and Harry's just like, oh my God, it's my family. This is amazing. So he's entranced, And it's mentioned that there's a powerful kind of ache inside him, half joy and half terrible sadness. I mean, and that's pretty much the whole thing there with what's going on. So he doesn't even know how long he ends up standing there, but then he hears some sound and it like brings him back to the world, and he's like, oh shit. And so he's like, all right, let me get back to bed. Like, I could stay here forever, but logic tells me I don't want to get in trouble. And, so he's like, I'll come back. After tearing his eyes away from his mother's face specifically, who obviously there's just like there's something about that connection. But anyway, so he goes back, and that's the end of that scene. And then the next day, Ron's like, dude, you took the cloak out without me, bro. You took the cloak out without me, bro. Oh my God, bro. Oh my God. And Harry's like, hey, my cloak, first time, me. You can go the next time. Which, I mean, to me, like, is nicer than you have to be. But, and Harry's like, and I want to see your family. And Ron's like, my family? You could see my family anytime. Just come around during the summer. Which is sort of a sign that sometimes, yes, Ron takes his family for granted. Not forever, but right now. And he's like, and Ron sensibly though does say, he's like, well, maybe it only shows dead people, which, and Ron doesn't, he knows that he's not being mean to Harry, so Harry doesn't take offense to him saying it so, bluntly like that. And then Ron notices that Harry's not eating, which, is always a symbol, especially in fiction, but also in real life, that there's some shit going down, and Harry's just like, I saw my parents, man. Like, it's half amazing and half horrible. I got to go back. And it's mentioned too that this has essentially driven the like if the holidays hadn't already driven the Nicholas Flamel thing pretty much out of his mind, now this thing with his parents is like a new obsession that just took over him out of nowhere, and he wasn't expecting it. And he didn't ask for it, but it happened. And now he's like, fuck Nicholas Flamel. Fuck Snape. I don't care about any of that shit. Now I know I can see my family. And Ron notices that, in his expression. He's like, you look odd. Are you good? Anyway, and so there's no answer because we switch scenes again. And it's the next night. Or that night, which is the next night, and he's with Ron this time, and they're trying to find the place. He's like, he's not getting there the same way this time. He's not going to the library and then running for his life. He's trying to get from the Gryffindor common room to this place, and Ron's complaining, of course, because it's cold, and he's losing feeling in his feet, and then, and Harry's like, nah, dude. We're going to find it. You asked to come along, but like, I'm finding it, and you're under the cloak too. So, you can run around on your way back to the common room if you want to without the cloak, or you can stay with me. He doesn't really say all that, but that's sort of implied. And they don't really run into anybody. They see one ghost, and that's it. And then finally, Harry sees a suit of armor, and he's like, wait a minute, we're there. Hang on. And he's like, okay, here we are. And so then they go into the room, and Harry runs to the mirror, and there's his family again. And he's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And he's like, look, see, come look. And Ron's like, I can't see anything. And it's like, come look, they're all over the place. And he's like, I can only see you. And Harry's like, fine, come stand where I am. And he moves aside. And then Ron stands in front of the mirror. And suddenly Harry can't see his family anymore either because he thinks because of the angle. But he just sees Ron's reflection. And Ron's like looking all like, whoa, look at me. And Harry's like, well, can you see all your family around you? And he's like, no, it's just me. But I'm older. And I'm head boy. And I'm wearing a badge. I'm holding the house cup and the Quidditch cup, and I'm Quidditch captain. He's basically, Ron is the best of the best of the best. And he looks at Harry and he's like, and just think about how worked up this mirror must get you to have you ask a boneheaded question like, do you think this mirror shows the future? And Harry's like, my parents are dead, bro. That can't be undone, and therefore not the future. And Harry's like, fuck this Quidditch cup bullshit. Get out of the way. Like, I want to see my parents. And they have like a little, almost a little tiff, like a little push, a little shove, like, and we get just a glimpse of what this mirror can do to a person because of the okay, so no. Anyway, so we're moving on. And just as they're about to like kind of get into their little scuffle, fortunately for them, they hear a noise outside, and that like again brings them back to the here and the now, and they're like, fuck, we're being loud, we're like yelling at each other. And Ron's like, okay, the cloak, let's hide. So they get under the cloak, and then fucking Mrs. Norris, the cat, comes around the door, and they're like standing there stock still, like, can she see through the cloak? Does it work on cats? And so they just stand there, and they stand there, and they stand there, and stand there, and eventually the cat leaves, and Ron's like, we gotta go, dude. I know you, but no. We gotta go. Like, the cat's going for Filch, probably. Let's get out of here. So the next day, like, it's just kind of a low-key day. And it's not mentioned, but I believe this is Boxing Day, which is what the English call the day after Christmas. And I learned from an English friend who lives in Puerto Rico that the reason why they call it Boxing Day is because this is when all the leftover food was boxed up and given to the servants the day after Christmas. So, that's a cheerful fucking name for a day. But it is what it is. And so, yeah, Ron's trying to, like, get Harry to do stuff, and Harry's like, I don't really want to do that. No, I don't want to go see Hagrid. You go see him. And Ron's like, listen, I know you're thinking about that damn mirror, but don't go back. And Harry's like, why not? And Ron's like, I got a bad feeling about it. Which, most of the time when Ron has a bad feeling about things, there's a reason. This one is maybe not such a big deal, but yeah, anyway. And so he's like trying to come up with excuses, and Harry's like, you sound like Hermione, like, just leave me alone. Like, and he's like, don't go. But Harry, of course, is fucking going. Like the stubbornness is in full effect. So anyway, this night he finds his way easier because he's been there twice now and he's by himself again. So he just speeds his way on down there. He's making more noise than he should. He's already gotten careless on his third fucking romp out through the school. But his excitement is just, it's too much. And it's not even regular excitement. It's almost more like I said, it's like become an obsession, like pretty much immediately. And it's understandable, but it's caused him to be a bit foolish. But anyway, he doesn't run into anybody on the way to the old classroom. And so he gets there, and he gets in the room, and he's seeing his parents, and he's just Like, man, I could just be here all night, just hanging out with my family. Except he hears a voice. Back again, Harry? And he's like, whoa. So he turns around and sitting in the room that he did not even notice on his way in is Dumbledore. And so, yeah, he just didn't even, and of course it's possible that Dumbledore was still invisible when Harry came in the room, but it's also entirely possible that Harry's, tunnel vision for getting to that mirror just caused him to ignore the fact that there might even be anybody in the room. Doesn't really matter. Either way, we do know that Dumbledore mentions that he can make himself invisible. Actually, just a few lines later, I see it. He's like, I don't need a cloak to become invisible because, yes, there are disillusionment charms in this world, and you can, if you know how to perform them well, and you have strong magic, then you can make yourself invisible without a cloak. So Dumbledore's like, yeah, so I see you found this mirror that I planted for you to find. Of course, he doesn't say that last part, but surely he didn't put that thing in a room with a door that wasn't locked for no reason. It could have easily been hidden away. Easily, but it wasn't. So yeah, that's my theory, is that Dumbledore put it there to A, give Harry that glimpse at his family, and B, to help teach him a lesson, because that seems like a Dumbledore kind of thing to do. And so he tells him the name of it, and Harry's like, I didn't know that's what it was called, because of course he didn't know that was what it was fucking called. But that's the kind of thing you say when you just gotten caught and you're nervous as fuck. And Dumbledore's like, so you figured out what it does yet? And Harry's like, it shows me my family, because that's all I care about. And he's like, but it showed Ron himself as head boy. Oh, no, I'm sorry. And Dumbledore says, and it shows your friend Ron himself as head boy. And Harry's like, how did you know? And that's when Dumbledore's like, yeah, I can become invisible, a.k.a. I was in here that last time, which would explain why they heard something shortly after they got into their little tiff, because Dumbledore probably caused something to make noise outside of the corridor to distract them and get them out of there, so that no other teachers came along and found them. Because, you can't be the headmaster and be invisible and be spying on people and then have other teachers get the same students in trouble. It's better not to have all this. Just gets confusing. And so he's like, what do you think that this mirror shows us all? And Harry's like, I'm still obsessed about my family. I don't really know answers yet. And Dumbledore's like, all right, well, let me explain it this way. The happiest man on earth would be able to use the mirror like a normal mirror. He would just see himself as he is. And Harry's like, it shows me what I want. It shows us what we want. And Dumbledore's like, kinda. But it shows us our deepest desire, the deepest desires of our heart. And then, of course, then he gives the example. He's like, you've never known your family, so that's what you see. Your friend Ron he feels overshadowed by his family, his brothers, and he sees himself standing alone, the best of them all. That's the thing that would, in his mind, Ron's heart and mind, make him what he would love to be. And so that's sort of the point, is that it's not just about what you want, it's about your deepest desire. And sometimes your deepest desire isn't always a great thing. It might be rooted in a good thought, but it's not always, maybe not always healthy for you, is maybe a better way of putting it. Because it's obviously not healthy for Harry to obsess over his dead family. Like, it's nice to see them briefly. It's nice to maybe even have a little bit of closure from that, as much as one can get from, having your parents die before you're old enough to really remember them. but it's not good to obsess. And no more is it good for Ron to, like, imagine that he's anything other than he is, the only way that he's going to be any better is through himself, not through, like, imagining that he's better than or different than everybody he's related to or whatever. Anyway, you get the freaking point. And so Dumbledore's like, yeah, but the thing about this mirror is it doesn't really give us knowledge or truth. And it's like, men have wasted away before it. And, now that I've taught you this lesson, I'm going to move it and don't go looking for it. But he's like, if you ever do run across it, you will now be prepared. Spoiler alert. And one of the more, in my mind, famous and quotable lines of the whole series is, "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Remember that." And it's, I think that is a good thing to tell somebody. And that's not, and he's not saying don't dream. He's just saying don't dwell on it and forget to actually, like, do the part. Like, don't allow your life to be basically staring into a mirror or into anything and just obsessing over what you can't have, because it's not going to help. And then Harry, in kind of a just stupid, like, kid fashion, or naive is a better word, kid fashion, it's like, what do you see when you look in the mirror, Professor Dumbledore? And Dumbledore's like, he's almost like he is taken a little bit aback, but of course he's such a quick thinker, and so he's like, I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks. Can't have enough socks, Harry. Anyway, so yeah, Dumbledore, as per usual, makes light, and then that's that, and then it just, we hear, we see the Harry later when he goes to bed, thinks like, that might be the one time that Dumbledore hasn't been truthful with me, but then again, kind of a personal question in retrospect, thinking about what this mirror shows you. And yeah, like I said at the beginning of this episode, this chapter shows us some heavier, darker sides to things for a few of our characters. And now you can see that I mean Ron, Harry, and in fact Dumbledore too. It's only hinted at here, but the fact that obviously Dumbledore doesn't see himself with fucking socks. There's clearly a different answer, and it's a very personal question, and the answer would be immensely tragic. So anyway, that, after what I'm afraid may end up being the longest episode yet, although this is the longest chapter that I've done so far too, is the end of that chapter. And therefore, because I know we've been going long and I've been rambling a little extra, and like I said, do forgive me, don't judge me too harshly. I'm adjusting to this other environment. I'm sitting on a floor, I have the microphone on a chair. I'm doing what I can, because I still love doing this and I want to keep doing it, and I definitely don't want 3 weeks to go by without me doing it, and so therefore it won't happen that way. But anyway, we are done, and yeah, a good chapter. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day, whatever time of day it is for you. I am going to prepare for the bedtime. So we will see you in the next one, and peace.